Joining me now is the author of international bestsellers, including The Strange Death of Europe, The Madness of Crowds, The War on the West, and his latest on democracies and death cults. Douglas Murray, before we dive into today's issues, I last spoke to you just a couple of hours after Charlie Kirk's murder. How do you see his legacy? He was only 31, but the impact he had on politics, on campus culture and the wider culture was enormous.
Yes, it was. And there's been such an outpouring in the last week almost since his assassination that it just really embeds that fact. The President, Donald Trump, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and many others have been incredibly involved in the aftermath, in the case of all of these people, consoling Charlie Kirk's widow and family and much more, and awarding him posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Perhaps as importantly, there have also, of course, been, I wouldn't say demonstrations, more gatherings around the world, across America, in London, as far afield as South Korea, of people paying tribute to Charlie Kirk. And that's been an incredible thing to see, actually, a huge outpouring. Charlie Kirk said that when he was asked how he wanted to be remembered, which is a rather scary thing in hindsight to think that somebody just out of his 20s was fairly often asked.
Yeah.
He wanted to be remembered for his faith, for his Christian faith. And it's really telling, I think, and a fine tribute to him that the people who have been gathering in tribute to him have not done so in the sort of way that certain sections of society do, by causing businesses to have to board up their shop windows and so on. No, very far from it. They've been gathering in prayer and in vigil, and that's really been an incredibly moving thing to see.
Now, Douglas, President Donald Trump has arrived in the UK to meet with King Charles. He'll be spending the night at Windsor before meeting Keir Starmer at the Prime Minister's residence. This is a historic visit, the first time a US president has had two state visits to the UK while in office. Douglas, there's going to be plenty of pomp and pageantry. There'll be further trade talk. What else do you expect to see from this visit? Will President Trump bring up those huge anti-mass immigration protests we've just seen in London?
It's possible that he will. President Trump's been asked about this visit and has stressed that it's really about the king in the royal family. And that's clearly his own passion in accepting this visit, is his passion for the country of his mother's birth. And for the United Kingdom, and especially for the monarchy. He has met Keir Starmer, of course, a number of times since coming back into office. It's an uneasy relationship in lots of ways, and you can see that. Keir Starmer's politics really couldn't be further away from those of President Trump. But on the other hand, the UK needs good trade relations with the US. President Trump and the Trump administration has been pretty generous so far in that, in those negotiations. And I would expect it to go smoothly. And I would imagine, given recent events in America, maybe, just maybe, the domestic anti-Trump left in the UK might keep their usual sort of rude protests down. You'll remember that last time President Trump went to the UK, people like the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, tried to make it all about themselves, allowed protesters to, I mean, it was within the law, but I mean, sort of insult the guest of the United Kingdom. I imagine there might be a little bit less of that this time. It's hard to say at the moment.
Well, on those protests across, London, certainly, the crowd number there was enormous. But these protests have been variously described by the media as far-right and extremist, white nationalists. But let's hear from a couple taking part who challenge those narratives.
What's your name? Why are you here today?
I'm Anne. That's Andrew, my husband. We want our children to be able to speak without being persecuted or being arrested. We don't want them to have tweets on X or anything else and being criminalized for thoughts. I think everybody should be able to speak.
And Douglas, let me play you the experience of this next woman, a black woman in a hijab, who attended the march expecting to be abused.
I'm going to the September 13th protest and seeing how many times I get called go back to Africa. Oh no. Oh no.
But let's see what actually happened and what she had to say after.
I went to the Tommy Robinson protest on September 13th and it was fine. I also went alone as well. I met my friend like 2 hours later in central London, but I was by myself and I went straight to the belly of the beast and I saw nothing but peaceful people, respectful people. I was even interviewing them. I asked them in my last TikTok. They're actually good people and I knew I shouldn't have been afraid. I was never ever going to be afraid because I grew up with English people. I grew up with white people and they've been nothing but polite, respectful. That's their culture, you know? Politeness, Britishness, you know. The issue is a lot of minority cultures for them have become the predominant culture in areas of the UK like London, Liverpool, Manchester, Luton, to the point that these towns and cities become unrecognisable.
Douglas, she gets it better than 95% plus of the media.
Yeah, I mean, good for her in one way. I mean, it's sort of absurd that in the country she lives in, she thinks there's a kind of belly of the beast, which is a protest like this. Good for her for acknowledging that she was wrong and was misjudging her countrymen and women. It's an astonishing thing to see this, Rita, because Tommy Robinson's Unite the Kingdom protest gathered a very large number of people in the centre of London, at least 100,000. Probably significantly more than that. It's always hard to say with these protests. Organizers always say they're larger and the police always say they're smaller. But it was a very much more peaceful event than any of the media wanted to admit it might be, or indeed in the end was. There were some arrests, but infinitely fewer than at, say, that great celebration of multicultural, diverse London, the Notting Hill Carnival, where there are always dozens of arrests and you know, stabbings and sexual assaults and so on. The Tommy Robinson Unite the Kingdom event went off peacefully. It went off positively. I watched a relay of what happened from the stage. It wasn't anything like a white supremacist, white nationalist thing. There was a black gospel choir. There were some Maoris doing one of their, you know, the chants and things, and the haka, and it was all very, you know, good-natured. Some of the speakers talked about the things that clearly are worrying my fellow Brits. I mean, things like, yes, the mass illegal migration. The fact that people who describe themselves as white British are finding themselves to be a minority in every major English city. That's a big one. I mean, that's not like an imaginary fear. That's just something that has actually happened without their asking for it. In fact, asking for it not to happen for, you know, generations now. There was a significant expression of concern about the rape gangs in the north of England and indeed across all of England. And much more, but it was very peaceable. And one of the things that's striking about it all, Rita, is not just the misrepresentation of it, but the fact that it would be actually very hard to imagine Keir Starmer, for instance, being able to raise any kind of mobilized, you know, group of people for a positive celebration of Britishness in this way. There were bishops of the Church of England who all came out to condemn the event. But one of the things notable about it was the prevalence of Christianity in it. There was a bishop from a rather minority sect who opened with a prayer. And there were calls for Christian revival at the event, all of which was very interesting. But isn't it fascinating that at this time when it's clearly a need in Britain for a positive vision of the country, for pride in the country, and much more. So much of the almost all of the political class, almost all the media, and everyone else doesn't want to be within a million miles of these people, and indeed doesn't even speak to these people. And good for that girl you just showed for realizing that actually, if they did speak to most of these people, they would realize they're not some sort of trolls you can't approach, who are dangerous, white supremacist, nationalist, Nazi, KKK, etc., etc. They're decent people who want their country to revive itself and not to fall into this appalling despond that it's currently in.
Now, I want to play you a clip from Nick Clegg. He's accused America and the Trump administration of interfering in elections in Europe, including the UK. Have a listen.
They interfere in other people's elections. They interfered in the German elections. Musk, supported the AfD. Vance met the AfD leader before he met Merz, the then Chancellor. They interfered in the Polish election. And they're now inserting themselves into British politics. And if you look at the way in which Tommy Robinson sort of fawned on Musk, look at the way in which Farage fawns about Trump. They're seeking to turn this country into sort of little MAGA Britain.
Douglas, he went on to say Keir Starmer should warn Donald Trump not to engage in this, what he calls extraterritorial interference in our democratic culture. What's your response to those claims?
I mean, Nick Clegg is accusing various Americans of inserting themselves into politics, partly perhaps because he inserted himself so poorly into British politics. Nick Clegg was a hideous politician, horrible politician, led the Liberal Democrat Party to one of its most historic defeats. He was a woeful deputy prime minister in a weak coalition government. He backtracked on all of the promises he made on the election trail once he was in office, and then ran off to Silicon Valley to make some money. By the way, with a company which is often itself been accused of election interference. When he says election interference, just everyone should bear in mind just the examples he gave there. Elon Musk is no longer involved in the Trump administration. He has every right to speak to a protest in London, which centered around, in part, freedom of speech. Nigel Farage has a long-standing relationship with the President of the United States. Nigel Farage meeting with the President of the United States is not some aberration. J.D. Vance speaking to a main opposition party in Germany ahead of also speaking to the party of government is not an aberration. That is sensible politics. Right. And I'm afraid that people like Nick Clegg, they've had everything so much their way. They themselves are used to interfering in elections. They themselves, if you want to play it at that, and it's not like a conspiracy theory, but just like meeting up with other politicians who, you should meet and keep channels open with. They've done that all their lives. They're forever interfering, if you want to call it that, in other countries' politics. And I'm afraid that, this is just an example of the fact that there are some people who can't bear it when they don't have the reins of power. And as I say, when he some of the smaller reins of power, Nick Clegg exercised them very poorly. But no, I mean, this narrative, it always comes from this bit of the sort of soft, squishy liberal elite, which is there are things that we do which we're allowed to do, but you're not. If you're in power, when the boot's on the other foot, you're not allowed to do it. It's just not on.
It isn't. And when he was at Meta, he was the global affairs president. He played a part in interfering with elections in a number of ways. So perhaps a bit of self-reflection would be called for there. Douglas Murray, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Pleasure as always. Thank you.